The night air quivers with the sound of iron on flesh. Bound against the cold earth, a man writhes as strong hands pin him down. The blade is not swift, it is deliberate, sliding along his back with agonizing precision. A hush falls over the crowd, broken only by his ragged gasps and the wet sound of skin giving way. Then comes the moment none dare to breathe through the ribs pried apart, one by one, cracking like branches underfoot. And when the lungs are pulled outward, spread wide, to glisten in the dim torchlight, the body no longer looks entirely human. It has become something else, a grotesque parody of a bird, an eagle sculpted from pain and bone wings, unfurled in silent defiance of death. Imagine the horror of standing there forced to watch. The torches flicker. The smell of iron and smoke clings to your tongue. The victim still draws breath, each heave pulling air across torn flesh. And in that instant, the question is burned into your mind. Is this what vengeance demands? Is this the price of dishonor? The sagas whisper of such scenes. They tell us of the blood eagle, the most feared execution in Viking lore. Yet as we lean closer to the firelight of history, doubts creep in. Did the Vikings truly practice this ritual of unimaginable cruelty? Or is it a phantom born from the clash of cultures, a story magnified by enemies to blacken the Norse name forever? Was the eagle real, or was it a myth carved from fear? That is the riddle we inherit. On one side stand the bones of history, the scattered hints from ancient texts that describe kings and traitors meeting their ends under the eagle's wings. On the other side lies the silence of archaeology. No bones have yet been found scarred with such markings, no irrefutable proof unearthed from the cold soil of Scandinavia. Between them lingers a story so brutal, so impossible to forget, that even if it were only a legend, it has the weight of truth in the human imagination. Stay with me, and I will lead you into the mead halls, where men sang of honor and feasted on glory. I will show you the shadows where betrayal took root, the prisons where fear gnawed through the night, the cruel stage where men became offerings to vengeance. We will descend step by step until at last we stand in the torchlight and witness what it meant to die beneath the wings of the blood eagle. And when we arrive there, when you see what they saw and hear what they heard, you must ask yourself, what is worse, that this horror truly happened, or that humanity has always been capable of imagining it? Before blood and terror, there was another world. To understand the cruelty of the eagle, we must first walk through the mead hall, where men raised horns of ale and sang songs that made the walls tremble. Picture it, the long wooden hall glowing with firelight, carved beams blackened with smoke shields gleaming along the walls. The air is thick with roasted meat, honeyed mead, and the deep laughter of warriors who believe themselves chosen by fate. Here sat the jarls and king's men whose power reached across seas, whose very presence demanded loyalty or fear. The Viking world was a cage gilded with honor. Every man's worth was measured not by gold, but by reputation. A word spoken in insult, a betrayal left unanswered, a death left unavenged. These were wounds deeper than any sword could give. To live was to walk a narrow path between courage and disgrace, and one misstep could cost you everything. Yet in that balance there was glory, the promise that your deeds would echo in the sagas long after your bones returned to the earth. The hall was warm, the voices were loud, and for a moment one might believe the world was unshakable. Outside the glow of the fires, however, the north was a place of shadows. Winter loomed like a beast over the horizon. Seas swallowed ships without mercy. Enemies plotted in the dark, and kin turned against kin when power beckoned. Violence was not the exception, it was the rhythm of life itself. And yet inside the hall, men still clung to the illusion of order. They called it law, but it was not the parchment laws of kings we know today. It was older harder, the law of vengeance of honor balanced in blood. It was within this fragile order that the blood eagle took root, not as casual cruelty, but as the ultimate punishment. To be chosen for such a death was not random. It was reserved for the worst of betrayals. The man condemned to the eagle was not merely an enemy. He was a symbol, a warning. His suffering would feed the honor of those who inflicted it, and his memory would become a story told by firelight for generations. Such was the paradox of the Viking world, feasting and laughter built on a foundation of violence and dread. For the man who would face the eagle, the cage had been gilded once. Perhaps he too had sat in such a hall, surrounded by friends, basking in the illusion that he was safe within its glow. Perhaps he had believed the mead would always flow, that his kin would always stand by his side. But power is a cruel feast once the songs fade and the torches burn low. What is left is silence, suspicion, and the ever-watchful eyes of fate. In a world built on honor, it takes only one crack in loyalty for the cage to shatter, revealing the darkness that was always waiting beyond the firelight. It never begins with a sword at the throat. Doom in stories such as these creeps softly, like a whisper curling through a crowded hall. Perhaps it starts with a glance that lingers too long, a smile that hides a dagger, or the silence of men who should have spoken in your defense. In the sagas, the seeds of the blood eagle are always sown in betrayal, in vengeance demanded for wounds that can never be healed. Imagine a feast where the air is thick with smoke and laughter, but at one end of the long table, a lord's gaze is fixed upon you. His brother was slain in battle, cut down by your blade. His kin were humiliated, their honor stripped before the eyes of men. Now his silence is heavy, his horn of mead untouched, his oath of vengeance burning, unspoken but undeniable. That silence is the seed. The stories tell us of kings condemned to the eagle for treachery, like King Illa of Northumbria, said to have murdered the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. When Ragnar's sons swore vengeance, they did not promise a simple death. They promised an eagle carved into living flesh. Whether Ella truly met his end beneath the eagle's wings, no one can prove. Yet the threat alone was powerful enough to live on in ink and memory. And it is the threat, more than the act, that reveals the cruelty of fate in this world. For once your name is spoken, in connection with the eagle, the walls of the hall grow narrower. Friends withdraw, allies avert their eyes. Even kin may whisper that the sentence is deserved. Every cough of laughter becomes a knife twisting at your back. Every horn, raised in toast, seems to mock your silence. The doom is not announced. It gathers one rumor at a time until it surrounds you like wolves circling in the snow. In such a world where reputation was life, a single accusation could undo you. Were you a traitor? Did you betray your jarl? Did you shed the blood of kin without honor? It does not matter. What matters is that others believe it. The sagas remind us again and again, truth is a fragile shield when vengeance demands a victim. And once vengeance takes root, it spreads like fire across dry fields. The condemned man does not know when his fate is sealed. Perhaps he laughs too loudly at the wrong moment. Perhaps he underestimates the grief of a rival. Perhaps his own pride blinds him to the whispering tide. But soon, the feast grows colder and the shadows lengthen. He is still seated in the hall, still holding a horn of mead. But in truth, he is already walking toward the place of execution. His doom has been planted. And like all seeds in the north, it will only grow harsher with time. It happens swiftly when the victim least expects it. One moment he walks freely among men he once called brothers. The next he is surrounded by hands that grip like iron. There is no warning horn, no chance to flee. The trap so long in the weaving now closes. Warriors seize his arms, wrench his head back, drag him from the hall into the raw night air. The world he thought belonged to him has turned against him in a single breath. The sagas tell us such moments were public, for vengeance demanded witnesses. It was not enough to kill a man, his fall had to be displayed. His fate made an example. The accused would be thrown before the Jarl. The crowd pressing close torches, casting harsh shadows on the faces of those he once trusted. A voice rings out, accusation, sharpened into words that cut deeper than any blade. Oathbreaker, betrayer, kinslayer. Titles once spoken in respect are twisted now into chains that bind him tighter than rope. Panic flickers, though he struggles to master it. He protests, but his voice is drowned beneath jeers. He reaches for allies, but finds none. Their eyes drop to the ground, their silence more terrible than words. Every path of escape collapses around him. The hall that once seemed a fortress has become his cage, and now it has opened only to cast him into the abyss. And then the sentence is declared the Blood Eagle. The words themselves are enough to silence the crowd, for even among men hardened by war and slaughter, the eagle was whispered with dread. Ordinary execution, a beheading, a hanging. A swift thrust of steel was common expected. But the eagle, that was not death alone. It was transformation, humiliation, agony turned into spectacle. Imagine the moment when he hears it spoken. The weight crashes upon him, heavier than chains. The earth tilts, the firelight blurs. He knows the meaning, knows the tales told of ribs broken apart and lungs pulled wide like wings. He knows too that no plea will change what has already been decided. This is not judgment, this is theatre, and he is its unwilling centerpiece. The crowd roars approval, some out of fear, others out of the thrill of vengeance satisfied. The condemned feels himself dragged backward, stumbling, as hands shove him toward the waiting darkness. There will be no trial, no appeal, no chance to wash the stain from his name. Only the long walk toward a death designed to erase not just his body, but his dignity. At last the trap is sprung. The hunter has become prey, and the man who once feasted in the hall is now carried into the night toward a stage where the cruelest ritual of all will unfold. The fire that once warmed him now illuminates his destruction. His life as he knew it is already over. The hours between judgment and execution are perhaps more cruel than the execution itself. For in that time, the condemned is not yet dead, but no longer alive. He exists in a shadow world, a space where every heartbeat reminds him of what is to come. This is the descent into darkness. Picture him confined perhaps in a cold wooden chamber or bound beneath the open night sky. The ropes cut into his wrists, leaving raw impressions in the skin. Every shift of his body reminds him of the strength of the men who dragged him here, the futility of resistance. His chest heaves, but each breath feels stolen, borrowed from a world that has already turned its back on him. Loneliness presses in hardest. The crowd that once jeered has dispersed. The guards who remain speak in whispers, their eyes sliding away when he meets their gaze. No one will speak his name with honor now. Even his kin, if they live, dare not come. To help him would be to share his fate. And so he waits in silence, surrounded by the murmurs of a world that has already moved on without him. The mind begins its own cruelty. He cannot help but imagine the eagle step by step. He has heard the stories. He has seen the way men pale when the punishment is named. The blade against the back. The ribs cracked open. The lungs pulled wide to flutter in the air. His mind runs the vision over and over until the thought itself is a torture greater than the ropes that bind him. He wonders, will he scream? Will he endure in silence as some claimed Ragnar Lothbrok did when cast into the snake pit? Will he be remembered as strong or as broken time stretches? A minute becomes an hour. An hour becomes eternity. He listens to the creak of wood, to the shifting of guards' feet, to the faint howl of wind through cracks in the wall. Each sound feels magnified, like the world itself is leaning close to mock his helplessness. Sleep will not come. When his eyes close, the eagle is waiting. When they open, he is still bound, still abandoned. And worse than fear is betrayal. He remembers the faces of those who once drank with him, who swore oaths by firelight. Their silence now cuts deeper than the blade will. No enemy could wound him so savagely as the absence of a friend. That absence speaks louder than the jeers, louder than the sentence itself. You are nothing. The night stretches on. He clings to thoughts of childhood, of meadows in spring, of the sound of a mother's voice long gone. But each memory is poisoned by the knowledge that it will be his last. The descent is complete. By the time the torches return to drag him out, he is already hollowed, a man consumed by the darkness of waiting for a death that promises no mercy. Dawn brings no reprieve. Instead, it delivers him to the theatre of judgment, a stage crafted not for fairness but for display. They call it justice, but he knows better. Justice here is a mask stretched over vengeance. The hall fills again. The benches creak beneath the weight of neighbours and kin. Yet the air is different, charged, expectant, hungry for spectacle. He is not a man brought to trial. He is prey dragged into the circle so the pack may tear him apart. The accusations begin sharp as arrows. A voice declares him oathbreaker. Another shouts traitor. Another names him kinslayer. Some stories contradict, but no one cares. Each word is another stone piled on his chest, each falsehood cementing the fate already chosen. He tries to answer, to speak, but his voice is swallowed by the tide of jeers. It is not that they cannot hear him, it is that they refuse to. His innocence, his side of the story, is irrelevant. The performance demands only his guilt. False witnesses step forward. Men he once trusted, men who feasted at his table, now stand tall and claim they saw what they did not. Perhaps they were bribed with silver, perhaps threatened with their own disgrace, or perhaps envy alone drove them to this moment. He searches their faces for some flicker of shame, some hesitation, but there is none. Their words flow like poison, and the crowd drinks it eagerly. The elders, the jarls, the ones meant to weigh truth and dispense fairness, sit in silence, their faces carved from stone, their eyes betraying nothing. He realizes with a chill colder than steel that they will not save him. They have already chosen their side. To intervene would be to unravel the fragile order, to invite blood feud upon blood feud. Easier to let one man suffer, to let vengeance take its course, than to risk the stability of the hall. In their silence, they condemn him more thoroughly than the shouts of the crowd ever could. The sentence is read again, the blood eagle. The words strike like a drumbeat, final and absolute. The crowd murmurs, some in excitement, some in fear, but none in protest. There is no appeal, no higher law to turn to. He has been stripped of every defense, every shred of dignity, until he is nothing more than a vessel for the vengeance of others. And so the trial ends, not with justice, but with theatre. The condemned is dragged once more into the cold air, his fate sealed not by truth, but by power, envy and silence. It is a facade, and he sees it for what it is, a stage dressed in the trappings of law, but hollow, rotten and merciless. Behind the mask of justice lies the oldest law of all, that the strong will feast and the weak will bleed. The night gives way to pale light, and with it comes the weight of inevitability. This will be his last sunrise. The world, indifferent to his fate, glows with a beauty that feels almost cruel. The sky above the fjord shifts from indigo to silver, streaked with hints of gold, as the sun edges over the horizon. The gulls cry, the waves lap against the shore. Life continues, as though nothing extraordinary is about to happen. Only he knows that for him time has run its course. They grant him a final meal. Not the feast of kings, no golden mead or roasted boar. A crust of bread, perhaps a strip of dried fish, set before him in silence. He chews slowly, not because he hungers, but because each bite feels like one last tether to the living world. The food tastes of salt and ash. It is not nourishment, but ritual, a reminder that even condemned men are allowed this final courtesy. He wonders if it is mercy or mockery. His thoughts drift carried away from the cold present to the warmth of memory. He recalls the sound of laughter in the hall, the clatter of cups, the weight of a friend's hand on his shoulder. He thinks of a child's voice, perhaps his own blood, once tugging at his cloak, asking when he would return from sea. He will not return now. That child, if grown, may someday hear only whispers of his fate, that he was carved into an eagle wings, torn from his own body. And what will the child feel? Shame, fear? Or will they simply grow silent, refusing to ask further? There are words he wishes he could send, but there is no letter, no chance for farewell. His voice, if lifted in plea, would only echo against the walls and be forgotten. And so, he keeps his silence, speaking only in the quiet corners of his heart, whispering to ghosts who cannot answer. When the guards come, he does not resist. His body is weary, but it is his eyes that tell the truth. Eyes hollow with the knowledge of what lies ahead, yet strangely calm, as if resignation has dulled the terror. He walks beneath the pale sky, each step heavy, each breath sharp with the scent of pine and salt. The cold air fills his lungs one last time, soon to be torn from him in ways too cruel to imagine. This is the cruelest part, more than the knives, more than the crowd, to live fully aware of the final hour, to taste the bread, to feel the wind, to see the dawn, knowing it is the last. And as he is led to the place of execution, one truth remains sharper than any blade. Death is not sudden, but a slow unraveling, a farewell written in each heartbeat until the moment the body yields to the inevitable. The place of execution is no hall, no chamber, but the open air where the sky itself becomes a witness. Torches flicker in the grey light, their smoke curling upward like offerings to unseen gods. A crowd gathers, some pressed close, in hungry anticipation, others hanging back uneasy yet unable to look away. The condemned is dragged forward and forced to his knees. His breath clouds in the morning air, ragged, uneven. This is not the silence of waiting. This is the silence before the storm. The ritual begins not with haste, but with precision. A blade, narrow and sharp, glides across his back. The skin parts slowly, deliberately, the line of the cut running from the nape of the neck downward. He shudders as the cold air touches the wound, the sting sharper than fire. The sound is soft at first, wet, intimate, almost too quiet for the crowd. But as the knife works deeper, the sound becomes something else. The tearing of flesh, the groan of a body unwilling to surrender. Then comes the breaking. The ribs, one by one, wrenched from the spine, forced outward. Each crack resounds like thunderclaps in the ears of those watching. The condemned's cries pierce the air, though some say the strongest endured in silence, biting down on their agony, as if defiance were the only weapon left. Blood pours freely now, glistening dark upon the earth, mingling with the smoke of the torches. The smell, iron salt heat, clings to every breath. And then the transformation. The lungs are pulled outward, unfurled across the broken cage of bone, spread wide like wings. The body, no longer merely human, becomes a grotesque sculpture, a living emblem of vengeance. The eagle. Its wings glisten in the cold light, rising and falling with every tortured breath. Each heave of the chest sends shivers across the crowd, for the man still lives his consciousness tethered cruelly to the flesh that betrays him. No poem, no saga can fully capture the sight. To see a man remade into an eagle is to stand face to face with the edge of human imagination, where cruelty becomes artistry and artistry becomes horror. The condemned gasps his breath, shallow, his eyes wide, staring into a sky that seems impossibly vast. Does he pray? Does he curse? Or is he beyond words, lost in the endless roar of pain? The crowd shifts torn between awe and dread. Some cheer voices roar with bloodlust. Others cannot watch, turning their faces away, ashamed of the fascination that brought them here. For all the image burns into memory, never to be forgotten. The spectacle lasts until the breath falters, until the wings no longer rise. And when it ends, silence floods the field. The eagle, so terrible, so unforgettable, collapses back into the stillness of a broken man. When the last breath leaves him, it is almost unnoticed. One moment the grotesque wings flutter faintly with life. The next they hang still, slick with blood no longer rising against the grey air. There is no proclamation, no triumphant horn blast to mark the passing. Only silence. The kind of silence that is not peace, but aftermath. The hollow echo of cruelty fulfilled. The crowd, so loud, moments before now, shifts uneasily. Some avert their eyes as though ashamed of their own hunger to witness. A few still stare, unable to pull themselves away from the horror, their faces pale in the torchlight. Those who had cheered are quieter now, their voices stolen by the finality of death. It is one thing to crave vengeance in story, another to behold the body it leaves behind. The executioners wipe their hands, their blades. Their faces betray nothing, no triumph, no remorse. To them it is done. The ritual complete, the eagle carved the vengeance satisfied. They have not killed a man, they will tell themselves. They have delivered a warning inscribed not on stone, but in flesh. Yet even they cannot quite meet each other's eyes. What remains of the body is scarcely recognizable. Once it was a man who laughed, who drank mead in the hall, who felt the warmth of the sun on his skin. Now it is a symbol stripped of dignity, reduced to bone and blood, arranged in a cruel imitation of wings. For some, it is victory. For others, it is an omen. Slowly, the crowd disperses. Some hurry away, muttering prayers, spitting to banish the evil sight. Others linger staring, as though trying to etch every detail into memory. Children are pulled away by their mothers, though they too will whisper of what they glimpsed, their words carrying the terror forward into legend. And what of the body? In some tales it is left where it fell a warning for days, until the crows strip the flesh, and only bones remain splayed like a ghastly bird upon the earth. In others, it is carried away hidden, burned as though even those who ordered the death cannot bear to live with the reminder. Whether displayed or discarded, the effect is the same silence, heavier than any roar. A silence that lingers long after the torches die and the people return to their homes. It is in that silence that the true weight of the blood eagle resides. For cruelty leaves not just scars on the body, but on all who behold it. And long after the cries of vengeance fade, it is the emptiness that remains, the realization that life has ended. Honor has been claimed, and yet nothing feels whole. The eagle spreads its wings not only over the condemned, but over every heart that witnessed. Centuries have passed since torches flickered on that terrible stage, yet the blood eagle has never been forgotten. It clings to our imagination like smoke that refuses to clear half history, half nightmare. The sagas speak of it with hushed awe, naming kings and traitors who met their end beneath its wings. King Ella of Northumbria. Ragnar Lothbrok's fabled killer is said to have been carved open by Ragnar's vengeful sons. Other rulers too are named in whispers, their deaths written not in ink but in legend. And yet historians debate. Was the blood eagle ever real, Or was it a phantom conjured by enemies of the Vikings to stain their name with unspeakable cruelty? The old Norse words that describe it may have been misunderstood, mistranslated, twisted by time. Some scholars argue it was never literal, but poetic, a metaphor for victory for birds of prey feeding upon a fallen foe. Others insist the detail is too precise, too visceral, to be dismissed entirely. Perhaps it was not common, but a punishment reserved for the rarest of betrayals, performed seldom but remembered always. Archaeology offers no certainty. No skeleton has yet been unearthed bearing the unmistakable scars of such a ritual. No written record from the Vikings themselves survives to confirm it. What we have are fragment sagas written down generations later, shaped by memory and myth and accounts from outside observers, often enemies who may have had reason to exaggerate. Between these fragments lies a void, a silence as deep as the one that followed the execution itself. But perhaps the question is not whether the blood eagle truly happened, but why the story endures. For in its imagery, we see the darkest mirror of humanity, the desire to make suffering into spectacle, to turn vengeance into theatre, to transform a body into a message carved in living flesh. Whether real or imagined, the blood eagle reflects a truth older than the Vikings, older than any single culture that cruelty once imagined becomes part of us. It is enough that people could believe it was possible. The echoes of the eagle stretch far beyond the fjords and mead halls. It reminds us that legends, even those soaked in blood, can shape how we see entire peoples. For some, the Vikings are remembered not for their art, their trade, their voyages across oceans, but for this, the image of ribs cracking open beneath the knife. A single vision seared into time, eclipsing the rest. And so we are left with the question that lingers long after the fire has burned low, which is more terrifying, that men once truly spread the wings of the eagle upon the living, or that humanity, in its endless capacity for cruelty, imagined it so vividly that the story has outlived kingdoms, kings, and centuries.